All right, so we're diving into some excerpts from the Bhagavad Gita this time. And wow, this is...
It's a pretty incredible text.
Yeah, I can already tell this is going to be a rich, deep dive. We're talking about one of the most important Hindu scriptures, so...
Definitely foundational.
Yeah, exactly. So how about we try to uncover, like, what is it about the Bhagavad Gita that makes it so enduring? And, how does its wisdom still apply to us, like, even today? Yeah. Thousands of years later.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a text that's resonated across cultures and across centuries. And what we're looking at here are essentially pieces of a dialogue, right? A conversation that takes place on a battlefield.
Oh, wow.
Between a warrior named Arjuna and his charioteer Krishna. Oh. But as you go deeper, you realize that Krishna is not just any ordinary charioteer.
Yeah, that's right. Krishna is actually an incarnation of the divine, which kind of makes this battlefield conversation a lot more interesting, don't you think?
For sure.
It makes you think about how the Gita is using this setting as like a metaphor for the struggles that we all face in life.
Exactly. The battlefield becomes this representation of our own internal conflicts. The decisions we wrestle with, the choices we have to make. And even in these excerpts, we meet other figures like the blind king, Dhritarashtra, and his advisor, Sanjaya and Pandu, who is the father of Arjuna and his brothers, and all these relationships really add these layers to Arjuna's dilemma because he's literally about to fight his own family.
That's a heavy situation. I can only imagine the turmoil.
Yeah.
How do you even begin to process that kind of pressure?
Well, that's where the beauty of the Gita's teachings really comes in. It offers us like a framework, almost a set of concepts to understand our place in the world and how to deal with these tough situations. Okay. Like, for example, the idea of dharma. Okay,
dharma, yeah. I've heard that that's kind of a tricky concept to really pin down, but how would you explain it in the context of these excerpts?
Yeah, so the Gita seems to be suggesting that dharma is about aligning yourself with your true nature, with your own unique purpose. Yeah. It's about understanding who you are at your core and acting in a way that's in harmony with that.
So it's less about following a set of rules and more about finding your own unique path, your way of contributing to the world.
Precisely. But of course, our actions have consequences,
right.
Which brings us to this idea of karma and reincarnation.
Okay.
The Gita explains that every action we take creates this ripple effect, and it shapes not just our present life, but also our future lives.
Okay, so we're talking about actions having lasting consequences, not just in this life, but potentially across lifetimes.
Yeah.
Wow, that adds a whole other dimension to decision making. It makes you think twice about every choice you make.
It certainly encourages mindful action.
Yeah.
And to understand this whole karmic process even more deeply, the Gita introduces us to the three gunas.
Okay.
Goodness, passion, and ignorance.
Right.
And these gunas are kind of like fundamental forces that influence our thoughts and our emotions and our actions.
Okay, I've heard of the gunas before, but they always seemed a bit abstract to me.
They are.
Can you maybe give us some examples of how they might actually show up in our lives?
Yeah, sure. So let's say you're trying to decide on a career path.
Okay.
If you're driven by this genuine desire to serve others, to use your skills to make the world a better place, that could be the guna of goodness at play.
Okay.
But if you're more focused on ambition, competition, achieving success, that might be the influence of passion.
Right.
And if you're making decisions out of fear, apathy, a lack of awareness, that could be the guna of ignorance kind of guiding you.
So even something like choosing a career path can be seen through the lens of these gunas. Huh.
Yeah.
This is making me reconsider my own motivations in different areas of life.
That self-reflection is really a key takeaway from the Gita. It encourages us to examine our thoughts and our actions to really understand the forces that are shaping our choices. And it offers us different paths, different approaches to living a meaningful life.
Right. And we see these paths outlined in these excerpts, right? Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga.
Exactly.
And each one seems to offer a different way to connect with the divine and to find liberation.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that the Gita doesn't present these paths as mutually exclusive. It recognizes that different individuals might be drawn to different approaches.
So it's less about finding the right path and more about finding the path that resonates with your own individual nature.
Exactly. And each path, while distinct, kind of shares this common goal.
Oh.
To move beyond the limitations of the ego, to transcend the cycle of suffering, and to connect with something greater than ourselves.
So let's dive into each path a little deeper, starting with Karma Yoga.
Okay.
Now, Karma Yoga, that seems to be all about action.
Yes.
But isn't the Gita also about detachment? So how do those two ideas go together? I'm a little confused.
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of Karma Yoga. It's not about renouncing action altogether, but rather about acting with detachment from the results.
Okay.
It's about doing what needs to be done, fulfilling your dharma without being attached to specific outcomes or rewards.
So it's like finding fulfillment in the doing itself, in the act of service, rather than getting caught up in like the potential rewards or recognition.
Exactly. It's about shifting your focus from what will I get out of this to how can I best contribute. It's a subtle but powerful shift in perspective, and it can be applied to all aspects of life, from our work to our relationships to just our daily interactions.
That's a really compelling concept, especially in today's world where we're so often focused on achieving very specific outcomes.
Right.
It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest rewards come from just showing up and doing our best without that attachment to the results.
Absolutely. Now, in contrast to karma yoga, which emphasizes action, we have jnana yoga, the path of knowledge and wisdom. And this path is about seeking a deeper understanding of the true nature of reality, the self and the divine.
So it's about contemplation.
Yes.
About delving into the philosophical and spiritual depths of existence.
Yeah.
It sounds like a path for people who are really driven by curiosity and a thirst for knowledge.
Exactly. It's about using your intellect, your reasoning abilities to penetrate the illusions of the material world and to grasp the underlying truth of existence.
And that brings us to Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion. Now, this one seems to be quite prominent in the excerpts that we have.
Yes.
It emphasizes cultivating love and surrender to Krishna.
Yes, and in these excerpts, we see this beautiful interplay between knowledge, action, and devotion. And the Gita seems to suggest that these paths, while distinct, ultimately converge.
So it's not about choosing one path over another,
No.
but rather recognizing that they can complement and enrich each other.
Exactly. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore how these paths intertwine and how they can guide us towards a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
I'm looking forward to that.
Welcome back to our exploration of the Bhagavad Gita. We left off talking about the different paths to liberation, and in these excerpts we see how they're not always separate lanes, but they can actually weave together.
Yeah, you're right. Like in one section, Krishna even mentions how those seeking heavenly rewards through rituals are in a way worshiping him indirectly.
Right.
It's like all these actions, if they're done with the right intention, can ultimately lead back to the divine.
That's a key takeaway. The Gita recognizes that people are diverse.
Yeah.
And their approaches to spirituality will be too. What matters is that sincere striving, that yearning to connect with something greater than oneself.
It's actually kind of a relief to hear that.
Yeah.
It means we don't have to fit ourselves into one rigid box, but we can find what genuinely resonates with us.
For sure.
But even with the right path, there are still internal battles to fight, right?
Absolutely. The Gita uses this powerful metaphor of a battlefield not just for the external conflict, but for our own inner struggles. And one of the most formidable foes we encounter both then and now is lust.
I can relate to that. Lust, desire. Those cravings can feel so strong, so overwhelming sometimes. Does the Gita offer any advice on how to deal with those intense feelings?
It does, and it tackles it head on. One passage describes lust as an enemy, a powerful force that can really derail our progress.
Okay.
But the Gita also offers a solution, understanding the true nature of the self.
So it's about recognizing that we're more than just our desires, that there's a deeper part of us that isn't bound by these cravings.
Exactly. We're not just physical beings driven by impulses,
Right.
but we're spiritual beings with a higher purpose. And the Gita encourages us to tap into that higher self, to use our intelligence and willpower to control those lower desires.
It sounds like a practice in self-awareness, learning to observe those desires without being completely swept away by them.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of the most striking passages in these excerpts, the moment when Arjuna gets a glimpse of Krishna's universal form.
Ah, yes, the cosmic vision. It's almost impossible to imagine what that experience must have been like.
The text describes it as awe-inspiring,
Yeah.
terrifying. Arjuna sees countless forms and faces and eyes emanating from Krishna, this vision of the divine's infinite power and presence. And it's a moment of profound realization for Arjuna,
I bet.
this humbling encounter with the vastness of creation.
To see that kind of cosmic scale would probably shift your entire perspective.
Absolutely. It forces Arjuna and us as readers to confront the limits of our own understanding. We realize that we're part of something much grander than ourselves, connected to this vast cosmic web.
So it's not just about individual liberation, but about recognizing our interconnectedness with everything around us.
Exactly. And in that realization, a sense of humility arises and perhaps a deeper understanding of our place in the universe.
That's powerful. So we've talked about conquering suffering less, experiencing this cosmic vision, and recognizing our interconnectedness. What other nuggets of wisdom can we glean from these excerpts?
Well, the theme of devotion of Bhakti Yoga keeps resurfacing.
Yeah.
And Krishna describes the qualities of a true devotee, things like kindness, compassion, freedom from envy and ego.
So it's not just about outward rituals or practices,
No.
but about cultivating these inner qualities, living them out in our everyday lives.
Precisely. It's about aligning our thoughts, our words, and our actions with these virtues, making them an integral part of who we are.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not just about intellectual understanding, but about embodying these teachings in our interactions with the world.
Yeah.
It feels like a lifelong practice.
It is. And the Gita suggests that this kind of devotion, this deep love and surrender to Krishna, is a powerful path to liberation.
Okay.
But what exactly does surrender mean in this context?
Right.
That's something we'll explore in more depth as we continue our deep dive.
I'm intrigued. That word surrender often carries a sense of giving up or losing control. I'm eager to hear how the Gita reframes that concept. So we're back, and I'm still kind of turning over this idea of surrender in my mind
Yeah.
that we talked about at the end of the last segment.
Right.
It's a concept that comes up a lot in these Bhagavad Gita excerpts.
It does.
And I'm really curious to unpack it a bit. What does it really mean to surrender to Krishna, especially like when we're in the middle of all of life's battles?
Yeah, it's a question that's resonated with spiritual seekers for centuries. And the Gita offers a really nuanced perspective on surrender. It's not about passive resignation or giving up our personal agency.
Okay.
Instead, it's about recognizing this higher power, this divine intelligence that's at play in the universe.
So instead of resisting the flow of life, it's more about aligning ourselves with that higher power.
Yeah,
Trusting that there's a wisdom beyond our limited human understanding.
exactly. It's about letting go of the ego's need to control everything and recognizing that we're a part of something so much larger than ourselves.
Right.
The Gita suggests that through surrender, we can actually tap into a source of strength and guidance that's beyond our individual capabilities.
It makes me think of those times when we're clinging so tightly to a particular outcome, and it just causes us so much stress and anxiety. Maybe surrender is about releasing that grip, allowing things to unfold as they may, and trusting that there's like a greater purpose at play.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And the Gita emphasizes that this kind of surrender is not a sign of weakness, but it's actually a source of immense strength. It allows us to act with clarity, purpose, and a deep sense of inner peace.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like letting go of the oars and allowing ourselves to be carried by the current, trusting that it will lead us to where we need to be. But there's another concept in these excerpts that I find both intriguing and kind of perplexing.
Okay.
The idea that the soul is indestructible.
Right.
Krishna repeatedly tells Arjuna that no weapon can harm the soul, that it's eternal.
Yeah.
What's the significance of that message, especially for someone who's literally facing a battle?
It's a powerful reminder that our true essence, our soul, transcends the limitations of the physical realm. You know, by emphasizing the soul's immortality, Krishna is actually shifting Arjuna's focus away from the fear of death and towards a deeper understanding of life's true purpose.
So it's about recognizing that death in the physical sense is not the end,
Right.
but rather a transition, a shedding of the physical body as the soul continues its journey.
Exactly. The Gita uses this metaphor of the body as like a garment that the soul wears for a time, and death is simply the shedding of that garment.
Okay.
The soul itself continues to exist, carrying its karmic imprints into its next life.
That's a comforting thought, knowing that even in the face of loss and impermanence, there's a part of us that remains eternal.
Yeah.
But if the soul is constantly reborn, is there any escape from this cycle of reincarnation?
That's where the paths to liberation or moksha come in. The Gita suggests that through practices like karma yoga, jnana yoga, and bhakti yoga, we can purify our consciousness, break free from the cycle of birth and death, and ultimately merge with the divine.
So it's about using these practices to align our actions, thoughts, and intentions with the divine will, and in that way, transcend the limitations of karma.
Exactly. And the Gita emphasizes that liberation is not some distant goal to be achieved only after death.
Right.
It's a state of being that can be cultivated here and now through mindful living, self-awareness, and a deep connection with the divine.
It sounds like a journey of continuous growth and evolution, refining our actions, and ultimately realizing our true nature as spiritual beings.
And it's a journey that requires courage, dedication, and a willingness to face our own limitations. The Gita reminds us that we're all warriors on this battlefield of life, facing our own inner and outer conflicts. But it also offers us the tools, the wisdom, and the guidance to navigate these challenges with grace and ultimately to emerge victorious.
This has been such an incredible journey. Exploring the Bhagavad Gita, even just these excerpts, has opened up such a new world of understanding. From the concepts of dharma and karma to the paths of liberation and the power of surrender, it feels like we've uncovered like a treasure trove of wisdom that's just as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago.
And it's a wisdom that continues to inspire and guide spiritual seekers across cultures and centuries. The Bhagavad Gita is a timeless masterpiece that invites us to delve deeper into the mysteries of life, to connect with the divine within us, and to ultimately realize our full potential as human beings.
So it's not just about acquiring knowledge, but about embodying these teachings.
Yeah.
Making them a living part of our daily lives.
Exactly. The Gita is a call to action, an invitation to bring these ancient truths into the present moment and to use them to create a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the Bhagavad Gita, but this is really just the beginning of your own exploration. Keep seeking, keep questioning, keep delving deeper into this incredible text. Who knows what insights and transformations await you on your journey? Until next time, may your own deep dives into knowledge be filled with wonder and discovery.
This conversation is powered by Google Illuminate. Check out illuminate.google.com for more. We're diving deep into the Bhagavad Gita today, exploring its core teachings and nuances. Are you ready for a truly in-depth look?
Absolutely. The Gita's wisdom is vast, and a thorough exploration is always rewarding.
Let's start with the very first verse. So, what's the significance of the setting, the battlefield of Kurukshetra?
It's not just a dramatic backdrop. It highlights the Gita's relevance to everyday life, even amidst chaos and conflict. The battle represents the internal struggle within each of us,
Intriguing. So the Gita isn't just for monks meditating in caves?
Precisely. It's a practical guide for navigating life's complexities, whether on a battlefield or in the boardroom, right?
Chapter 1 sets the scene. Arjuna's grief is palpable. What's the root of his distress?
Arjuna's compassion, his reluctance to fight his own kin. He's grappling with the moral implications of war, questioning the value of victory at such a cost. It's a tough one.
And how does Krishna respond to this initial reluctance?
Krishna doesn't dismiss Arjuna's feelings. Instead, he uses Arjuna's dilemma as a springboard to unveil the deeper truths of the self, action, and duty. I see.
Krishna's approach is quite different from what we might expect from a traditional religious figure.
Exactly. He doesn't preach blind obedience, but engages in a philosophical dialogue, addressing Arjuna's doubts and concerns directly. Yeah.
So the battlefield becomes a classroom of sorts.
Precisely. A dynamic setting for a profound lesson on Dharma, the righteous path.
Chapter 2 delves into the nature of the self. What's the key takeaway regarding the soul?
The soul's immortality. Krishna emphasizes that the soul is eternal, unaffected by birth, death, or the changes of the body. Right.
This concept of an eternal soul contrasts sharply with some modern materialistic views.
Absolutely. The Gita asserts the soul's inherent nature as consciousness, distinct from the material body.
And what about the concept of karma yoga, selfless action?
Krishna presents karma yoga as a path to liberation. It's about performing one's duty without attachment to the fruits of action. Makes sense?
So it's not about avoiding action altogether.
No, it's about acting selflessly, dedicating actions to the Supreme Being rather than seeking personal gain.
Chapters 3 and 4 explore the interplay between action and knowledge. How are they related?
They're complementary paths. Karma yoga, selfless action, purifies the mind, preparing one for the path of jnana yoga, the pursuit of knowledge.
And what's the ultimate goal of both paths?
Union with the Supreme Being. Both paths lead to the same destination, though the approaches differ.
Chapter 4 introduces the concept of divine incarnation. What's its purpose?
To re-establish Dharma whenever there's a decline in righteousness. The incarnations act as guides and protectors, helping humanity rediscover its spiritual purpose. I see.
So Krishna's teachings aren't just relevant to a specific time or place?
No, they're timeless and universal, addressing fundamental human questions that transcend cultural and historical contexts.
Chapters 5 and 6 discuss renunciation, sannyasa, and meditation, dhyana. How do these relate to action?
Renunciation doesn't necessarily mean withdrawing from the world. It's about renouncing attachment to the fruits of action, performing actions selflessly. Meditation is a means to cultivate this detachment. Right.
So a yogi can be active in the world and still be a renunciate?
Absolutely. The key is detachment from the ego and the desire for personal gain.
Chapter 6 provides practical instructions for meditation. What are some key elements?
Finding a secluded place, controlling the senses, focusing the mind, and practicing regularly. The goal is to still the mind and achieve a state of union with the divine.
And what happens if a yogi fails to achieve this state?
The Gita assures that even if one falls, the yogic practices of previous lives will guide them towards the divine in future lives.
Chapter 7 explores the nature of God's manifestation. What are the key distinctions?
Krishna describes two aspects: the material energy, Prakriti, and the spiritual energy, Purusha. He is the source of both, yet transcends them.
And what about the concept of Maya?
Maya is the illusory energy that veils the true nature of reality. It's the force that binds us to the material world.
How can one overcome Maya?
Through devotion and surrender to Krishna. Only those who surrender can easily overcome Maya's influence. Makes sense.
Chapter 8 discusses the soul's journey after death. What determines its path?
One's thoughts and consciousness at the moment of death. Remembering Krishna ensures a path to his abode.
So the Gita emphasizes the importance of constant remembrance of Krishna?
Absolutely. It's not just about a final act at death, but a continuous practice of devotion throughout life.
Chapter 9 reveals the most confidential knowledge. What is it?
The importance of selfless devotion to Krishna. It's about surrendering all actions to him, acting as his instrument.
And what about the different forms of worship?
Krishna emphasizes that all forms of worship, even those directed towards other deities, are ultimately directed towards him. The most important is devotion, right?
Chapter 10 details Krishna's divine manifestations. What's the significance of this?
It highlights Krishna's omnipresence and his presence in all aspects of creation. He is the seed and essence of everything.
So Krishna is not just a historical figure.
No, he's the eternal, all-pervading supreme being, manifest in countless forms.
Chapter 11 describes Arjuna's vision of Krishna's universal form. What's the impact of this vision?
It's a transformative experience, revealing Krishna's cosmic power and his presence in all beings. It instills awe and devotion.
But Arjuna also expresses fear. Why?
The vision is overwhelming, revealing the vastness of Krishna's power and the impermanence of the material world.
Chapter 12 explores the path of devotion. What are the key distinctions between worshiping the personal and impersonal aspects of God?
While both paths lead to liberation, Krishna considers devotion to his personal form easier and more direct. It fosters a loving relationship.
So the Gita doesn't advocate for a purely impersonal approach?
No, it emphasizes the importance of a personal relationship with the divine, fostering love and devotion.
Chapter 13 focuses on the distinction between matter and spirit. What's the key concept?
The body is the field, Setra, and the soul, Setrajuna, is the knower. Krishna is the knower of all fields.
And what about the three gunas, the modes of material nature?
These are the qualities of goodness, sattva, passion, rajas, and ignorance, tamas, that condition our experiences in the material world.
How do the gunas affect our actions and understanding?
They influence our thoughts, emotions, and actions, binding us to the cycle of birth and death. Transcending the gunas is crucial for liberation. Right.
Chapter 14 explains how to transcend the gunas. What's the key?
Developing knowledge and detachment from the gunas. This leads to a state of pure consciousness.
Chapter 15 uses the analogy of the banyan tree to illustrate the material world. What's the significance of this?
The tree represents the illusion of material existence, with its roots in the material world and branches extending upwards. Cutting the roots through knowledge and detachment leads to liberation.
Chapter 16 contrasts divine and demoniac qualities. What are some key distinctions?
Divine qualities include humility, compassion, and self-control, while demoniac qualities include pride, anger, and greed.
And what are the consequences of cultivating demoniac qualities?
Bondage to the material world and repeated cycle of birth and death. Cultivating divine qualities leads to liberation.
So the Gita emphasizes the importance of self-improvement.
Absolutely. It's a call to cultivate divine qualities and transcend the limitations of the material world.
Chapter 17 discusses a threefold faith. What are the key distinctions?
Faith in the mode of goodness involves devotion to the Supreme Being, while faith in passion involves devotion to demigods, and faith in ignorance involves devotion to ghosts and spirits.
And what about the concept of sacrifice, austerity, and charity?
These are also categorized according to the three gunas. Those performed in goodness are selfless and without expectation of reward.
Chapter 18 summarizes the path to liberation. What's the ultimate instruction?
Complete surrender to Krishna. Abandoning all other paths and dedicating oneself to his service leads to liberation.
So the Gita emphasizes the importance of a personal relationship with the divine?
Yes, it highlights the path of bhakti yoga, selfless devotion to Krishna, as the most direct and effective path to liberation.
This discussion has highlighted the Gita's profound wisdom and its relevance to modern life. What's the most crucial takeaway for our listeners?
The Gita offers a comprehensive path to self-realization, emphasizing the importance of self-knowledge, selfless action, devotion, and ultimately, surrender to the Supreme Being. It's a practical guide for living a meaningful and fulfilling life. Absolutely.
And how can listeners apply this knowledge to their daily lives?
By cultivating divine qualities, performing their duties selflessly, and dedicating their actions to the Supreme Being. The path is a journey of self-discovery and devotion.
That was a great discussion. Thank you so much.